Attention, attention, all personnel. Incoming podcast. This is MASH Matters.
It's MASH Matters, the podcast celebrating the greatest television series of all time, brought to you by us. I'm Ryan Patrick, and he's Jeff Maxwell. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Ryan Patrick. Oh, I love our band is so great. Aren't they wonderful?
Thank you.
Have a hand for them.
Sit down, ladies.
Oh, yeah.
Jeff, how are you, man?
Hey, I'm okay. You and I had a little conversation earlier. I had a little technical problem.
Yes.
But by deleting and rebooting, it seems to have worked itself out. So
that pretty much works with everything in life, I think.
It does. Yes. And now I'm happy that it's all working and we can do this because we have a wonderful guest.
This is going to be an interesting conversation, I think, because it's somebody who was not on the show and did not have his own personal connection to the show, but his mother had a very close personal connection to the show. And his mother was actually on the show a few times as well. We know her name because the final episode that was filmed, the penultimate episode before the finale aired, was dedicated to her memory. And that is the only MASH episode that was ever dedicated to anybody's memory. So today we are welcoming Greg Izay, who was Connie Izay's son. We welcome him to MASH Matters. Hello, Greg.
Hey, thank you very much, Ryan and Jeff, very much.
So, Jeff, you have a much better idea of who Connie was because you worked with her on the show.
I did work with her. I was fortunate enough to do that. Unfortunately, she did not spend a lot of time in the mess tent. And I spent even less time in the OR. So unfortunately, we didn't get together too much in terms of my expertise or her expertise because she couldn't advise me on how to do the cream weenies and I couldn't advise her how to do the bandages. So,
it's funny, Jeff, because when you and I first spoke about that, it was equally the same for her, I imagine, because she was the technical advisor on the show, the daily technical advisor for the medical stuff. She was an RN. And so when she was setting up things in the OR, let's say, you were probably filming in the mess or vice versa. And so I think she was on the set, equally as much, but she wasn't always involved in everything that everybody else was. And so, yeah, it was a little bit like that.
Yeah, I was a little disjointed for the two of us anyway, but I certainly knew and I knew her. And I just want to tell you, in everybody's opinion, and I'm sure you know this, including mine, she was absolutely loved and adorable. She was a diminutive person, I'd say. Wasn't a large person.
No, she wasn't.
And I think that added to, how appealing she was and how friendly she was and how wonderful she was because you just wanted to, hug her and grab her and put her on your knee and give her cookies and stuff. She was just a wonderful, wonderful person and brilliant and smart. And like you said, she was an RN, right? She was an actual RN.
She was, and, speaking of, her personality was large. Her laugh was large. That's
yes.
For sure. And her love was large. And her love of nursing, I mean, her history goes back to the Virgin Islands before she even married my dad, but she was involved in the hospital in New Mexico in Albuquerque, where I was born, Loveless Clinic. And she was involved in things like, doing some of the blood work and things on the first, 7, 8 astronauts that were coming through the hospital at that time.
Wow.
And then later she got into, because of my dad moving to Burbank when I was 3, I think in 59, around there. He was an actor. That's all he had ever done. And so they moved out here to Burbank for that. And Mom started working at St. Joseph's Hospital in Burbank, took care of Walt Disney towards the end. She was involved in helping set up the ICU unit there. But then through that, she got involved in working at Universal Studios in the medical unit that was there for both some of the tours. There wasn't a lot, but it was mostly for people on, on sets and things, and then got into location work and then medical advice, technical advice.
So she was at Universal as a nurse. She wasn't there as a technical advisor for any TV show.
Yeah.
She was there doing the job as a nurse, right?
Kind of a side job, I think, that eventually turned into location work because they had to have, that's where she did. I mean, she diagnosed Sammy Davis Jr. on location in Las Vegas once with pneumonia before, they really got him diagnosed.
Wow.
She just was involved with people and she loved the industry from that side of it. And she couldn't stand the other side. Like she had to be on camera a few times on MASH. And she'd be behind a mask and, she was 5'1", whatever, 5'2".
Yeah.
And you could just see her peeking out over the mask.
Yeah.
She loved you guys. I'll tell you that. She loved that cast.
Well, that cast loved her. There really was a bond, and there was a really unique bond, between the cast and her. The work that she did was so vitally important, really, to the success of the show, because otherwise everybody would have looked like an idiot. There were a bunch of actors with instruments in their hands going, "What do I do with this?"
I think that was the beauty of MASH at the time. And when she was on Marcus Welby, she came in at a time also where they were getting a lot more comments about upside down x-rays and just stupid stuff. And MASH had such an authenticity and look, I'm preaching to the choir here, but it was a different feel. And the authenticity of the horror of what the war was like inside of those tents that we really did, you saw it in movies and stuff, but certainly wasn't sitcom material.
No.
But the reality of it, I think, was what meant a lot to the actors about everything they did, and to her, I think, from a technical side.
You mentioned Marcus Welby. Probably people who are listening to this will go, "What did he say? Did he sneeze? Was he coming in his mouth? What's a Marcus Welby? I had one on my neck, and I went away."
And James Brolin, how's that? James Brolin.
Yeah. And so, okay, for anybody's welfare here, Marcus Welby was a television show. It was a medical television show. Mm-hmm. And so she was there to help keep those people on that show from looking like idiots too. And so she was on that. How many other shows did she do?
Well, TV shows in terms of that actual, I think that technical job, I think those were the two. But the first movie that she was pulled in on as a technical advisor was the first airport movie, the one with Dean Martin and I think, spoiler alert, there was a bomb on the plane, I think, people got hurt.
Yeah.
That was back in the 70s, I think. And then she started on MASH right about the same time that Harry Morgan came in. And here's where the 6 degrees of separation starts getting right weird. So they came on about in, I think, around 1975, around that time. And she passed during the last season, as you said. But the thing with Harry, my mom knew Harry before MASH. My dad did musical comedy in Hollywood at a place called Words and Music, somewhere, a little small theater in Hollywood. And it was my dad, it was Harry Morgan, it was Gavin MacLeod, it was Loretta Swit.
Oh, wow.
And Mike Henry, which he was an old, well, at the time he was a young actor that played Tarzan on TV. He also went on to play in Smoking the Bandit, which we'll get back to that, but he played Gleason's son in that comedy of the 70s, right?
Yeah.
So think about all those people. So then my mom ends up on MASH. Harry Morgan comes in. Loretta Swit's on the show. They were friends with my family. Loretta was in our home before she was ever on MASH.
Wow. Fascinating. Yeah. Wow.
And then it gets weirder with Jamie and his wife, Jamie Farr, and his wife became friends with my parents, my dad, Vic, and my mom, Connie. And they actually were looking at property in Fraser Park. I think I was trying to remember that at one point. They were kind of all going to get something out there, and I don't know what happened. So then years and years later, into the mid 2000, let's see, around 2010 or so, I ended up back in Burbank, not intentionally, but I was in education at the time. And I came back to Burbank as a high school assistant principal at both Burbank and Burroughs, where I graduated. But then I went back to the classroom towards the end of my teaching career. And the first 5th grade class I taught, Jamie Farr's grandson was in my class. And
Way.
it's like, seriously, come on. I hadn't talked to Jamie in years. I saw him in a show in Hollywood a few years after my mom passed. But I sent him a note. He sent me a really nice note back. But that was just kind of a bizarre kind of thing. One other thing, the thing with Alan, I still have memories of Alan and Mike coming down the hallway in the hospital, not towards the end with my mom, but a few years earlier, she had a pretty serious deal. And I remember Alan and Mike Farrell coming into the hospital with Italian food. She was a little spicy Italian. And I just remember that they were just that kind of people with her.
Yeah.
And with everybody, I think.
It's interesting, too. You mentioned Mike Henry. Mike Henry also appeared on an episode of MASH as Margaret's husband, Donald Penobscot.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So here's my connection with Mike and with Sally Field and with just weird things. I stayed in and out of the business on and off, but back when Smoking the Bandit was filmed, I think in 77, 78, I think it came out. I ended up getting cast in a small part towards the end of the film, and I'm driving Hal Needham's truck. He's the director. This is the first feature he did, I think. He had done all of Bert's stunt movies,
He was a stunt man, yeah.
Stunt director. Yeah, he's stunt director. So Smoking the Bandit was his first feature, I think. So I end up, just by chance, getting cast on a pickup scene he didn't like that he shot originally. So he comes back, goes out of Universal Studios. I get cast. The guy that was supposed to be doing the part that I had, this little part, was a semi-regular on Eight Is Enough. And he's a kid. We were all in our teens, late teens. And he missed the call at Universal. It was a location call. Oops. So we get out to location. And Hal Needham tells me to get in the truck. He had me make up a couple of lines or some stuff written. But Mike Henry and Sally Field in that movie. Mike worked with my dad on Words and Music many, many years earlier. And one of the TV shows that we went on location when my mom was just a nurse was when Sally Field was doing The Flying Nun. So I met her years and years before.
Wow.
And my dad worked with Mike. And it just all comes around. It's kind of weird. Look, I was in and out of the business in a very, very small way. So that one connection with Smoking the Bandit is just kind of bizarre.
Isn't that something? Smoking the Bandit. I used to live in an apartment building in Studio City. And one of the people that lived there was a very nice guy, and his wife or girlfriend, I'm not sure what it was, but they were very happy together. And he turned out to be working for Hal Needham, and he was Bert's stand-in and stunt double, because he looked a lot like Burt Reynolds. So Hal really liked him because he could run in front of the camera and actually look like Burt Reynolds instead of somebody else. And wait a minute, that's not him. So he did that for a couple of films. That was kind of fun.
If he was on Smoking the Bandit, then he probably was there on the shoot that I was at.
Yes.
Because it was his stunt driver and Sally's stunt woman in that sequence. I was with a bunch of teenagers, and I'm actually driving Hal Needham's truck. I think it's Foxtrot or something like that. And we're cutting off the highway patrol, and they had two Trans Am, and they had brought them back to California. They were just beat to crap, taping them up in between shots. So I did that, and then again, I didn't do a lot in between that. I got into education, but later on I ended up doing a lot of stage theater. My dad didn't see a lot, but the last thing my dad saw me in, again in the early 2000s, was a show called Jake's Women. And I did it in a small community theater. In fact, it was a guy that I had directed in a non-musical version of Les Mis, and he wanted me to do this part. Well, I'm pretty sure Neil Simon wrote this part for Alan Alda, because I think there's like 116 pages, and he's got dialogue on 115 pages. And I've never gone up worse on an opening night than I did. And I'm alone on the stage. But I think he wrote it specifically for Alan. And my dad I think that's the last thing my dad probably ever saw me do. For sure on stage. So, again, like these little connections, they may not mean a lot to everybody listening, but they sure meant a lot to me and to my family, and kind of connecting those things and knowing that both my mom and dad had some pretty interesting connections, and they carry on. I'm talking to you guys about it, and people listen.
Well, that's true. They were the nucleus, really, for you to do all of that stuff and you to be connected with all those people.
Absolutely. Certainly wasn't based on talent.
No. But you were, I'm very curious about, you say, well, I was in and out of the business, but wait a minute, you were directing a thing, and then you were in a thing, and you were in a movie, and you were in a play. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, for also having two different masters and man, now we're getting deep in the weeds, but education became important to me. I even taught theater arts at the high school level for about 5 years. So yeah, I had a really strong desire as a kid, being around it all the time. I was in, the first movie I was ever in, I was, in the back of a truck that my dad was doing. My dad was around Sam Peckinpah and Hugh O'Brien. That's who he went to, those are the people he was around.
Wow.
So yeah, my first agent was probably because of my dad. I did a national Toyota commercial and everything seemed like, oh, this is how it works. All right. Well, then I had other things. I ended up getting married young and did a lot of different things, but I always had it. Like I said, I went back and I did a children's show in Oregon for a couple of years in the early 2000s because of connections. But then I went back to education and I kind of wrote it out, in the classroom at the end of that. And now I just kind of enjoy life. I do some writing and I don't, it's not a big deal anymore. I don't pursue it, but it's nice talking about it once in a while.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's the way I feel too. It's I don't do it anymore, but it's nice talking about it.
Yeah, you got a great story. I'm sure that comes up enough that it keeps you busy talking about it.
Yeah, a little bit.
I don't think I've ever really met anybody though who, the Venn diagram of Sam Peckinpah and Smokey and the Bandit don't really cross.
Ryan, I'm not kidding. Like I got a great, I know this is about my mom, but it's because my mom, she was so funny about the business. I told you about, I should tell you a little story about, it was a part of our lives because of my dad. They even met when my dad was, I think, directing a telethon in New Mexico. So this is how far my mom was out of the business. When she first started working at Universal at that first aid building, some guy comes in and like I said, it was people, it could have been people from the shooting, on the set, or it could have been somebody in one of the tours or whatever, cast, crew, whatever. So it wasn't separated. I don't know how exactly it was. Mm-hmm. But this guy comes in, he cut his finger. And so she's filling out this paperwork and she asked for his name. He said, Clint Eastwood. And she said, how'd you do it? And he said he cut it on a car door. So she said, so are you in transportation? And this was early in his career, but he still is taken aback. She just didn't fit into that part of the industry. But then on the other hand, my dad, I think when I was 10, I remember Sam Peckinpah asked him to he had to do a screen test on an actress that he didn't really like for a film he was doing, Sam. I think it was Cincinnati Kid, but I don't want to overstate that. But I remember going to Warner Brothers, which is now Burbank Studios, because we were like 5 minutes from there. We lived in Burbank. And I remember being in this room a couple of times, like one of those bungalow type things that just had I think a coffee table and a couple of chairs. And that's where they would, go in and do some work for acting scenes and stuff. So my dad's in there. I think we went twice. And Sam, I guess, got a hold of my dad after the screen test and he was pissed at my dad because she did so well. They didn't end up casting her. But I found out later it was Sharon Tate.
Oh, wow.
My goodness. Wow.
Yeah, it was Sharon Tate. Huh. And like, I'm serious. Like my dad was a well-known character actor in Burbank at the time. He and Rance Howard. I went to school with Ron Howard. He was a year older than me. Didn't know him really, even though both our dads were kind of character actors.
In the interest of full disclosure, your father was Victor, right? His father's name was Victor Izay.
Yeah, Victor Izay. He went by, Vic or Victor, mostly Victor and stuff that he wanted to be known as Victor in, I think he went as Vic Izay maybe in Astro Zombies and a couple of those movies. But, Girl in the Gold Boots. And you know what? I got to be honest, that one's on Mystery Science Theater once in a while, so I'm really proud of that one.
That's awesome. So your mom, she ends up on MASH, and I do want to make a distinction here too, because we had Dr. Walter Deschel,
Correct.
who was also part of the show. He was a medical consultant, but his work was more with the script side, the writing side, making sure that all of that information was correct.
Yeah, he was credited, I think, as the medical advisor or whatever, and you didn't see her credits as a technical advisor.
Yeah, but she was on set to make sure that, like you said, on Marcus Welby, they were holding x-rays upside down. Just make sure that just the little things like that were done correctly.
Absolutely.
And I would think that is present company excluded, Jeff, but that working with actors sometimes can be a challenge, I would think, especially when you're trying to make sure that everything is correct. Did she ever talk about the challenges of working with actors?
I think what you're asking is dirt.
Yeah, yes. Give us some dirt, Greg.
Give us dirt. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, most of it's about Jeff, but I just...
Oh, yeah, all right.
I knew it.
You know what? That's one of the most interesting questions, I guess, in all the years that I've ever been asked. Not that I've done a lot of this, but even in just casual conversations. I think what I've almost always said to people is there was something about that cast and the crew that was different. In all honesty, no, I can't say that. I can say I witnessed one experience in the commissary with my mom when I went out to see her on set one day. And I kind of remember that Gary Berghoff, it was one of his scenes, I think it was in a bathrobe. And I bring up Gary's name because I think Gary was, let's be honest, I think Gary's name has come up as, he was a little bit different at the time on the show. And I only used that term because I was younger. So, I don't think it was like a conflict thing, but I just remember sitting with Gary and my mom having lunch, and Artie Johnson came up to the table.
Artie Johnson from Laugh-In, right?
I love this. I love this. Yeah.
Yeah, this is great.
And they both were like bantering with each other. And it's like, I still can't remember what it was about. I just remember, I must have been in my teens, late teens or late 20s, somewhere in there. And I just remember my mom and I sitting there with Gary, and then we went back to eating, and I can't remember what it was about. I don't know. I know that they really loved Loretta and, Jamie and his wife. I know her love for Alan was so deep. And I remember calling Harry, I think, when she passed, I had the list. I can't remember who I talked to at what point. The people from Marcus Welby, that was, at that time, I threw out James Brolin's name. I'm blanking on Marcus's name.
Oh, isn't that Young?
Robert?
Yeah, Robert Young.
Robert Young.
So
yeah.
I spoke with him on the phone, I think, when she passed. But I mean, I don't know why I jumped to that other than to go back. I don't remember any stories or any conflicts that ever came home with her about people from the show. I'm sure there were times. Mm-hmm. I think it probably may have happened more at the table, like around the table for writing sessions or, things that she felt adamant about, medically maybe. I don't know.
Darn it.
Yeah, shucks.
I keep waiting for good dirt, and I just can't find it, man.
I do know she was fiery, and she, if racial issues came up, man, she would jump real fast. And so I think they came home a few times where she might have been the one that, sparked off a little bit. They might have been talking about her. It always came from a good place, though.
Yeah, she was just so warm and friendly and really did what she did so well. And I think that was one of the main reasons people really had so much respect for her, because she was so good at what she did, and she did it so genuinely and without falderall. She knew what she was doing, and she did what she was doing, and everybody trusted that. And I think that was one of the greatest reasons that everybody was so friendly and loved her so much. Because I will say this about the cast. I think that's kind of the same thing with the cast as well as actors and actresses. They were in that same category of appreciation for what they did that she was. And so I think there was a great bond there because that's who they all were, really.
Absolutely. And Jeff, it's in your voice as well. I knew that the first time I spoke with you, even knowing that your role was much different. And we talked about that, that you guys didn't probably cross paths as much as, some of the others, but you both were similar in the sense, and I heard you talking about, anytime you could go, going to watch Loretta work or when they were doing a scene we wanted to see. And I think in ways, Mom, she wasn't as caught up in I don't know how to put this. She saw everybody as people. I think she knew who you guys were as actors. And as that show became more and more evidently incredibly popular, she was never affected by that. She just was, I think, drawn to you people because of your passion for what you did. And yeah, she was accepted for what she did with passion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't always work that way, especially in Hollywood, let's face it.
No, that was MASH was a rare commodity, and so is the relationship between her and the cast. It was a very unique time in history, a unique time in the television business, and a very unique time for all of us who were connected. And you use the word crew. Everybody that was connected with that show has that kind of warm, fuzzy feeling in their hearts. And that's what's so incredible. And that's, I think you said that too. That's why we're talking about it. This is 2025, and it started in 1972. And we're still sitting here talking about it and talking about your family. And Ryan and I talk about it, a lot on MASH Matters. And it's an amazing experience. And it's wonderful that you're here. And it's wonderful that we get to talk about your mother, Connie, and your dad.
I so appreciate those words. And I think I mentioned this to Ryan when we were presetting, being able to do this the other day. I said that I think it was Thursday, it was 43 years since my mom had passed. It's like, that just kind of takes you back. What the heck? Mm-hmm. And the thing is, I got this from both of my parents, and I'm kind of trying to find a way. My mom affected people in different ways. I have a niece now. She's a nurse in the Virgin Islands as we speak. Partially because she never met my mom. Unfortunately, both of my sister's kids had not been born by the time my mom passed. And so, but the connection and the connection that my sister gave to, her daughter, it's kind of carried on. She has some of my mom's stuff from the MASH set, from her medical stuff. And I had a love for the theater and for acting because of my dad and my mom in ways. And so I learned to pass that on. But one of the things, even teaching or being on a set or being on a stage, my dad always made it very clear to me. And so I did to my students that we are all one group. Mm-hmm. The cast and crew kind of thing, that doesn't work for everybody in terms of real separate. And I think with that show, it was just blended really well.
It was.
So your mom loved to be behind the scenes.
She did.
So how did she find herself being on screen in 3 episodes of MASH?
Okay. So, and I can, you probably are more familiar with them than I. So I know she's somewhere in the operating room. So I can almost tell you, Ryan, it might have gone like this. It might have been something pretty technical that she was really adamant about. And everybody probably finally just stepped back and said, what the hell, Connie, you do it. If they can't hold that thing right or put it, where it's supposed to go, then you do it. And yeah, just say yes, doctor, or something.
Right?
I don't know. I can't. But that was almost too much for her to say yes, doctor. I could hear it in her voice. My dad joked about that. I think he put her in a play, when he was doing theater and somewhere I know, and I think when he had his theater in Albuquerque, he put her on stage. But no, that was not her. She was never gonna, move in that direction, let's say.
Well, it's very interesting that you said that because, there's some stuff about your mom online, but there's not a lot of information on there. But I did come across a newspaper article from what year was this? 1958, I believe it was, about a play that was opening in Albuquerque.
Yeah, New Vic Player play.
Yeah, the New Vic Players at the Actors Workshop in Old Town. And your mom was in the show.
Yep.
And the show was called The Moon is Blue.
Moon is Blue. You're right.
The film version of The Moon is Blue factored into a major plot point in an episode of MASH many, many years later. So I just find another connection with your mom.
Yeah.
That's great.
And they may have been aware of what that connection was and talked about it at one point. I don't remember my dad later talking about that connection. So.
Yeah. It's just interesting. I just find, all these little, and you mentioned Ron Howard earlier. Ron Howard was in an episode of MASH. It all comes back to MASH, Greg. It all comes back to MASH.
Swear.
Yeah. And that's why we do this podcast.
Yeah. It matters.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So your mom, she passed away in 1982, August of 1982. It was breast cancer. Is that right?
So the progression was she had breast cancer, and I think this was back. She had a pretty serious bout, but then she had radical mastectomy. I think she had about 5 years after that, and then she was walking on the track with my dad at Burroughs. We lived They lived across the street from Burroughs High School in Burbank, and she had a side ache, and probably within 6 months, it became liver cancer and she passed.
Oh, my goodness.
It was after the breast cancer, and I think there were about 4 or 5 years. And my sister's a better historian, so I may be off on this a little bit.
That's fine.
Pretty sure it's about like that.
We'll have her on next week.
She's cuter. She's more interesting, and she's cute, light, and fiery like my mom.
I'm looking at I did a little bit of looking on Google. We all look at Google for pretty much everything now. But and I use the word adorable. She's adorable in this picture, and she really is a very wonderfully cute woman. And I just see the names. She played Nurse Connie, interestingly enough, in Dreams. Dreams, of course, a very beloved episode from all
to some, yes.
To some, to 4 or 5 of the people who watched it.
It's a polarizing episode, yes.
Yeah. Morale, Victory, and Gorilla My Dreams.
Another dream.
So, another dream, yeah.
Something going on there. It's funny. I mentioned my sister, and I got to mention my brother too, because we're all, we were at different stages. I'm the oldest. My sister, so I'm, 69 now. So, back then, I was moving on into things that were keeping me, occupied in terms of getting married and stuff and having kids. And my sister's 3 years younger, and then my brother's 5 years younger than me. So he had a whole different, he was living at home more during that time. He actually ended up having some more connection with the show later on. I know he got to know David Ogden Stiers because he came. When did David come on the show?
Season 6. So
okay,
been around 79.
Yeah, so it was in that same. There was that group that kind of made that same transition around when my mom did. So there was a little bit of a connection there. And I know Steve somehow ended up. He might have a couple of good stories. I don't want to throw him under the bus, but we all have different. If you get to and both of my siblings are wonderful people that have also been in the business in different ways, and we all feel the same way. We all were affected in many wonderful ways by both of our parents' involvement in a lot of areas of the industry, but in particular, MASH. It's just one of those iconic things that, how many people get to talk like we're talking about this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just not a lot.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about your family and the positive things about show business, which is unusual too. Because now, show business has its pitfalls, certainly. And people can get very frustrated, but you seem to have a positive attitude towards it, and certainly of your whole family.
I think I've been blessed in a lot of ways, Jeff, because even later I ended up doing a children's show in 2000. I left education in California. I went to Oregon. I did a documentary for one of my drama students. Her dad was an ex-Hollywood guy, and he was starting to produce some stuff, and he did this documentary. We won a best documentary at some film festival. Gene Allison was the host or something. I can't remember. But he asked me to do co-star in a TV series that he wanted to do, a children's show. Well, we ended up doing this show called Nana's Cottage, and it was on TBN, Trinity Broadcast Network, like for 2 years, Saturday morning, prime time. And I thought, if a purple dinosaur could make it, we should be able to, we should have a shot. And we came close. And I knew the day that, we're shooting on a big sound stage in Oregon, in Eugene. But I knew the first day that the guy came out and said, there was a problem with the banks this week and the checks. And I go, we're having lunch. I go, that's the last lunch that's going to get paid for. And it was.
Oh.
But because of that, and because of my love for the industry, and never a negative part of it that ever stuck really badly, and I think because of my parents and my brother and sister, my kids have had different experiences. I have a son that teaches film studies and has written a book on on certain aspects of what he finds interesting in the industry. So everybody kind of goes in a direction, but I don't have any feelings from any of us that those were negative times.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, that's good. That's a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's can't be said by a lot of people anyway in show business. So your mom was interested in the business based on marrying your father, I guess, and he was an actor. And so that's what turned her on to the whole idea of show business and that kind of direction.
Yeah. I think there was never anything other than that. And the passion for what she knew. And she knew medicine. She knew the operating room. She knew, how to make it work. And that's what interested her. So I don't know other than that and the connection with my dad. And don't get me wrong, they didn't always agree on the different parts of the industry, I think. Mm-hmm. My dad struggled as a character actor, even with some of those names that I dropped. Mm-hmm. That part of the industry wasn't always easy. Mom was very successful in, her run with a couple of TV shows. And that's a lot different for a guy doing a judge one day and a doctor the next day on a TV show, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think those were some of the areas that they probably dealt with, more intimately than we shared as openly as a family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you're the firstborn?
I am.
Okay.
As far as we know.
Well, that's another show. Yeah.
Hey, I tell my oldest son that. As far as we know, you're it.
You're it.
Hey, you sent us some photos of some things that you had there. One is a director's chair with your mom's name on it, a couple of hats, and then there was a piece that was hanging on the wall that it looks to be signed by a lot of people from MASH. Can you tell me about those?
Yeah. So the signed MASH photo, or that's framed. That's the original. I ended up making copies and framing them for my brother and my sister. That was done. I'm going to say that might have been the poster that they did towards the end. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure. If I'm messing that up again, my sister's much better at this than I. But it's got everybody. It's got everybody on there. I still have the chair. Those are that framed photo of everybody's signatures. That's a pretty prized item, I guess.
Oh, I would say so. Yeah.
You may be the only people I've ever showed that to outside of the people that have come through my houses over the years, or stuff like that.
Do you mind if we post a picture of that on our website for other people to see?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
That's a wonderful piece. It's always something to cherish for a long time.
That chair is pretty fucking awesome too. I just said the F word. You might have to cut that out.
I saw that chair and that got me too. That chair, those chairs were so much a part of my eyesight for so many years. It got me.
These things weigh like 150 pounds.
Yeah.
Too. They're not easy to move around.
They're not. And they're quite comfortable, actually.
Yeah.
They don't look like they would be, but they are.
Yeah. That's old school, baby. What's funny is when I was teaching drama, because that chair was a prized possession of mine, and it was in my houses. But one of my casts, I think it was Guys and Dolls that I directed, and I suck at musicals. I've done a couple. I played Daddy Warbucks only because the high school kids conned me into doing it. And I said, it's going to be painful for the audience. It's going to be painful for the orchestra, and it's painful for me. But I did it. But I actually love directing musicals. So the first one I directed was Guys and Dolls, and it was awesome. But I had some great kids. But I think it's that cast they knew that I loved that chair of my mom's, and they had one made for me.
Oh,
It's
nice.
a black director's chair, and they all signed it and everything. So that's another one of my prized possessions.
So here we go again. Guys and Dolls, originally on Broadway. The original cast featured Robert Alda.
Oh.
His son was Alan Alda.
Yeah,
Everything coming back to MASH. Yep.
everything.
Seriously.
Yeah. Speaking of MASH, as I mentioned earlier, the final episode that was shot was As Time Goes By, the penultimate episode before the finale, and it ends with a still dedicating the episode to your mother. What did that mean to you and your family?
Well, that's a great question, because that's probably one of the most lasting things. And what I do tell people, and you probably said it better than I have, and I just say, the last regular episode of MASH was dedicated to my mom. And especially here, I had never heard that had not happened in all those seasons. That's the first time that had ever happened, and that was the last show. So yeah, it even means more now to me hearing that. I think that brings me usually to a place of quiet conclusion if I'm trying to explain what it was. But yeah, it's a very meaningful moment.
Yeah.
And it still is.
And I like it because not only does it give your mom credit for what she did, because she didn't really receive a lot of credit through the years on air, but even MASH fans to this day, when her name comes up, they'll be able to Google her name and see everything that she was able to do in her career, and what an amazing career she had, not just on screen and behind the scenes, but just in general, helping so many people throughout the years. And
she even had a little thing with Jonas Salk at one point in the hospital, like connection at one point.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, wow. And the astronauts, like it was just that.
Yeah.
So my dad used to bug the shit out of you. Why didn't you get their autographs? Well, first of all, they're astronauts. We're shooting their ass up into space. Nobody knows we didn't know who they were at that time. So that was my dad.
Oh man. Well, Greg, this has been great. I am so glad that we were able to connect. I mean, honestly, you talk about the longevity of MASH. One of the reasons the MASH has such longevity and lasting power is because of its authenticity. And that can be tied directly to the work that your mom did on the show.
Absolutely. And it was transformational in terms of the writing, the producing, the directing, the acting, the crew. There were just a lot of people throughout that show, from behind the scenes to in front of the camera, and it was just a wonderful experience. I mean, and I appreciate the fact that you guys have done this. And like I said, I've listened to a couple of episodes now. I've got to start listening to some more, because it's brought back a lot that I just haven't had to really talk about for so many years.
Well, it's such a delight to talk with you, because as I say, Connie and I didn't work together constantly, but I knew her and she was adorable, and I had nothing but love for her and respect for her. And it's a wonderful thing to go back in time and to remember those days. For myself, as you're talking, I'm seeing all these scenes in my head that they were the relationships that we did have and the moments that we did talk to each other. So it's really, I get chills. So thank you for being here. It was wonderful.
No, I appreciate those words. And she was a wonderful person. Both of my parents were wonderful people. And it's a wonderful part of that history that I'm very lucky to have been able to experience, and as well visiting it with you guys and listening to you guys put passion into it.
It was a big family, and you're part of it. So thank you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Well, that does it for this episode of MASH Matters. Thank you all for listening. You can connect with us, mashmatterspodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, here's looking up your old address.